Welcome to the Holding Time podcast, where we share inspiring stories from remarkable mothers who participated in the Holding Time project in Bradford. Each episode, we explore their unique breastfeeding stories, the highs, the lows, the challenges and the triumphs. Whether you're expecting, a new parent, or simply curious, we invite you to hear from these resilient warrior women as they share their experiences. Find out more at holdingtime.org.
The first time I met everybody at the group wasn't actually at the group. They were holding a breastfeeding event in Centenary Square in Bradford. Vinny was 2 weeks old. My partner Jamie had just gone back to work, and that was my first day out of the house without Jamie. So I made it to town on my own, which was difficult. But I got there and they had all these tents up in Centenary Square in town, and I just walked over to them like a zombie. And they said, "Oh, are you here for World Breastfeeding Day?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "But we're not breastfeeding yet because it's really hard." And I sat there and they actually got Julie and Judy from Breastfeed Together, managed to get Vinny to latch, kind of, and we had some form of feed there that day. So that's the first time I saw them all. But I knew as soon as I met them all, I thought, these ladies are going to help me. And then I didn't see them again till September when the group started. But yeah, I had been under the infant feeding team and they were so helpful. But I needed that weekly, informal support where you can relax and feed, where it's more like being at home rather than being at an appointment.
Looking back, are you surprised by the journey that you've had post-birth?
Absolutely, yeah. When I think now that I went into town that day, post C-section, 14 days after a C-section, I think I were insane. And I feel really, sounds odd, but I feel really kind of, not sorry for myself on that day, but I feel really kind of a lot of compassion towards me on that day, thinking that were hard. If somebody said to me on day 14, I'm gonna go into town, I would say don't do that. That I think my motivation was, and I thought this is your chance to go get some support, and I really wanted the support, and I really wanted to breastfeed. And the motivation, I think, was birth did not go to plan at all, and I thought, I really need something to go to plan. I really wanted it to work. And I knew that if I got the support, it would. Before I was pregnant, I never wanted to breastfeed. I didn't even consider it. It wasn't really on my radar, breastfeeding at all, but neither was having children. But that's another story. But when I got pregnant, which was a big surprise, I wanted to breastfeed for bonding purposes, but I was worried that because this pregnancy was a big surprise, that bonding might be difficult.
Were you worried about postnatal depression?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there a history of that in your family? Or
I would say I've had experience of it, yeah, with people around me, and I was really aware of it, and I wanted to set myself up, give myself all the best chances of that not happening. I know that breastfeeding doesn't make you not have postnatal depression at all. But I just wanted to really kind of stack the odds in my favour to hopefully not feel like that.
I mean, it's really complicated, the relationship between postnatal depression and breastfeeding, and I don't think there's been enough research to say exactly how it works. What they found is if you really want to breastfeed and you can't, then it can be really damaging for your mental health.
That's what really was motivating me, because I thought, you feel so terrible after how birth went. What's it going to be like if you struggle to breastfeed and stop? Are you going to feel a double kind of grief there? But also, interestingly, looking back, there were times where probably stopping would have been the better option for my mental health. but I'm very, to my detriment sometimes, extremely stubborn. And I wanted to power through it to get to where we are now. But there were days where stopping would have been the better option for my mental health, definitely.
So when was the hardest time? Like, tell me about the difficulties that you had.
I wouldn't say we were feeding comfortably until he was probably 3.5 months.
Was that a problem with the latch or tongue tie, or?
Yeah. Tongue tie, well, even before that, C-section.
Did that affect your milk supply?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was very, very, very lucky that I was under the care of the home birth team at Bradford, who on day 3, because he'd lost 12.5% of his weight, they got me into the infant feeding team on day 3. So I started a pumping regime from day 3. Because he had quite a severe posterior tongue tie, he hadn't been latching properly, and there was just no milk transferring whatsoever because he wasn't latching, he wasn't asking for more milk. So until pumping on day 3, I didn't see any milk at all until then.
He wasn't even looking like he was hungry.
No. And when I look back now, I do have some guilt about those 3 days. You know, he wasn't being fed, really. I'd managed to express colostrum while I was pregnant, and that's all he was having for those 3 days. And I didn't know that then. I thought when he was latching he badly, that he was getting something, but he wasn't, because he lost so much of his weight.
It's surprising how many women I speak to whose babies lose a lot of weight.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happened to me, and I think it's really undervalued how traumatic that is for the mother.
Yeah. And when I look at videos of him now, even though I knew, and I'd done all this research about breastfeeding, and I knew how hard it was going to be, and I knew I needed support, I knew where to get support, I had a lactation consultant's number on standby while I was pregnant for after, in case I needed it. But when I think back, I think I was such a zombie. It felt like a dream those first 3 days because of everything that had happened. I was in labour for 3 days. I think I was so exhausted, and I knew I was going to be tired after I'd given birth. I wasn't ready for 3 days of labour.
Did it hurt when you fed him?
Oh, yeah. And we had a lot of conflicting information of, oh, yes, he does have a tongue tie, no, he doesn't, yes, he does, no, he doesn't. But he did have his cut on day 5 or 6, but it didn't help.
Was he put on a feeding plan?
On day 3, the home birth midwives referred us to the infant feeding team. And in my zombie state, I was thinking, well, that'll be a while. But it wasn't. She rang me the same day, this wonderful lady from the infant feeding team. Her name was Ria. I think that day.
Ria she's mentioned a lot to me.
Yeah. So she rang me that day, and we went up to the hospital, and she took one look at me and she said, "You need some sleep," which I did. I told her the whole tale of from my waters breaking 3 days before giving birth to that day that we were on, and she apologised a lot for some things that had gone on. And she said, "How much do you want to breastfeed?" And I said, "A lot." And she said, "Good, because you will be able to breastfeed. I'm going to get you to be able to breastfeed." And I was just so grateful to have that support of somebody saying, right, we are going to do this. I know everything's been so uncertain for the past, week, but we will be able to do this, and I'm going to help you. It will like somebody just picking me up and hugging me. I had Ria at the infant feeding team who saved his breastfeeding journey. I wouldn't have been able to carry on without Ria. But it was one appointment a week, and I counted the days till those appointments where we would get help, and my partner were counting the days as well. Like the day before the appointment, I'd be feeding him in agony. I had a really, really painful labour, but there were parts of breastfeeding that were more painful because my nipples were bleeding and had blood blisters on them and were completely cracked. And every single feed made the next one even worse. And I would, the day before an appointment, I'd be feeding him, like tapping my leg, trying to get through a 45-minute feed that wasn't even effective feed at all because his latch was still rubbish, and the tongue-tied division had not helped. And, my partner would be saying to me, we're going to help tomorrow, just one more day. I remember Ria saying, you've got quite substantial nipple trauma now. I remember thinking, I said to her, how do I make that better then? Because I've got to keep feeding him.
What about nipple shields? Did you?
Yeah, we went through nipple shields.
That's the obvious thing, isn't it? Although they're not quite easy to use.
No, we really struggled with nipple shields. We had to express. So from day 3, where we went to meet the infant feeding team, she put me on the pumping plan, which I did. So I started expressing milk that day, really. She gave me a pump, a hospital grade one that I could take home. Yeah. So she let me take that pump home and I started pumping every 2 hours. So by that night, I had enough milk to start giving him expressed milk in a bottle. Felt like I had triplets because I was pumping, which took time, and then feeding him in the bottle and then trying to breastfeed him. That's all I was doing. And it's all I would think about as well, to the point where I would see people, like passing the house or something, and I would just daydream and I would think, I wonder if they breastfed their baby. I wonder if they found it hard. And I was thinking that about people I didn't even know, people I would see, but it were taking over every single thought. I remember watching the telly and I remember Loose Women being on. And I remember thinking, I wonder if they all breastfed, I wonder if they did, I wonder if they found it hard, and it was just strange that I was shoehorning it into every thought I had. And my friends and family who have never breastfed or haven't been around breastfeeding, I felt like, they wanted the best of me and they were saying, you have been through so much here. Why are you prolonging the pain, physical and mental, when you can make life so much easier for yourself by not? I understood exactly what they were saying, but I wanted to carry on because I was stubborn and I needed to do it for me. I didn't want to feel like I was trying to be a martyr about breastfeeding, because I didn't want to be a martyr about breastfeeding, and I wasn't somebody who is so passionate about breastfeeding that, I was going to die on this cross because I needed to breastfeed. There wasn't possibly any other alternative, but I just knew I would be in a worse place if I didn't.
I suppose my question constantly talking to women about their experiences is this thing of like, obviously Ria really helped, the infant feeding teams do really help, but if you would like queen of the world and could float above yourself in those really, really awful days when you were suffering the most,
yeah,
and you could like wave a wand and make anything happen, what would you have done for yourself in those days?
I would have had a massive community of women round me to help, to say that what had happened was hard, and people with you every day to kind of carry you through what you needed that day to get you to the next one. And that understanding, and when I say understanding, a different kind of understanding to when you kind of talk to somebody at a baby group and it's kind of very surface level chat of, yeah, it's hard, isn't it? I really needed that depth of understanding and somebody who could be, really look into my eyes like Ria did and say, this has been absolutely hell for you. We're going to be able to do it. I'm going to give you all the support that you need to be able to do it, and you will be able to do it. I needed that reassurance and knowledge and support from a community that really understood. I was actually lucky in the support that I had. I had the infant feeding team. I know not everybody gets that. I had his tongue tie divided twice within the first month of his life. Not everybody gets that. if I needed to, I would have been able to pull the money together. It wouldn't have been easy, but to go see a lactation consultant. And I knew that those Breastfeed Together groups were starting in September. So I was lucky, and I've got a really, really supportive partner. He could also see me in 6 months' time, and he knew that if I didn't get this, it was going to be a double whammy of things I didn't get. So I was lucky. I didn't have a partner saying to me while he was screaming, just give him a bottle. I'll go to the supermarket now and get some formula, because why are you doing this to yourself? He never, ever, ever said that. And I'm really thankful for that, because if he had done, I might have said, yeah, the idea of baby groups before I had a child was hell to me. Absolute hell. I thought, what on earth would I want to go and sit with other screaming children for? And as a teacher as well, I don't know, being with children all the time, I thought, why on earth, if I did have my own, would I want to be around other people's children out of choice?
Yeah.
But I realise now I've really eaten my words with that massively. The breastfeeding group that I go to, that's for me. I'm not taking him to be massaged. I'm not taking him to stimulate with loads of sensory stuff. He goes and he plays with other children there. We've got some toys and things that they play with on the floor. But that group is where I go and sit with other women, and we're not focusing on what the baby is doing. We're just talking about what's happened this week, and we just talk. And there's peer supporters there that are, had all the breastfeeding training, so they advised as well. But it's that you need, I think, through talking to women at these groups where we do actually have real conversations. It's such a shame that women seem to realise how much support they need and how much women are not supported, and kind of set up to fail with things after the event, whether that's what they've been through in birth, and wish that they were more informed about the choices they could have made in birth. Similarly with breastfeeding, not having that support in place, and then when it comes to grieving for it years later or weeks later, whatever it is, thinking, oh, if I had had that support, if the system wasn't as it is and I had have had that support, I might not have felt like this for years.
In a way, I think when you're pregnant, maybe you don't want to hear that it could be really hard. Women do try to tell you, don't they? They come up to you and they say, oh, I had a terrible birth and stuff. You think, oh, stop telling me this.
Yeah.
But I think with breastfeeding, it is a place where actually forewarned is forearmed. With birth, it so varies, doesn't it? Like, it could be bad, it could be okay. But I think you're limited possibly also in how much you can control in that situation. But with breastfeeding, I think there's quite a lot of control you can have if you know in advance what might go wrong, and you at least sort of have some clue about it.
Yeah.
There was a share of the voice of like what birth and post-birth is like. It's just all about birth, isn't it? The number of people I meet who just did loads of preparation for birth and just didn't prepare for breastfeeding.
Yeah. Well, I'm very guilty of that. I did so much preparation for both, but I kind of told myself when I was pregnant in my head that this physiological intervention-free home birth that I'd planned led to breastfeeding. So then when I didn't get the home birth intervention-free, that threw a massive spanner in the works, physically and emotionally. I don't know. I'd told myself that if you get all those things right, breastfeeding will come easier.
And now looking back at it, how do you feel about natural birth and intervention? I mean,
at the time, I was very not anti-intervention, but I didn't want any because I thought that it would end up leading to something I didn't want, like a cesarean. Now, when I talk to women in groups, women have had intervention and had a vaginal birth, even though they had an intervention. and I'm left with a bit of a feeling of frustration about that. I stacked all my odds up in my favour to go the most kind of natural way possible, but I still ended up with an emergency cesarean 3 days later. I wish that I didn't associate breastfeeding with a vaginal natural birth, because it doesn't have to be, you've had a cesarean so you can't breastfeed.
There's no real correlation between having a vaginal birth and then being really great at breastfeeding. There's no. I don't think they're really all that connected. The only thing is maybe that if you have a really difficult birth and lose a lot of blood, it can affect your breastfeeding, or if you have a C-section, it can affect, it might be at a time if it's early when your milk hasn't come in or whatever. There's a relationship there, but there isn't really a kind of, in a way, when you talk about it, it does sound a bit like there was like a series of ticks.
Yeah.
And then at the end, the prize was you got this breastfeeding.
Yeah, I definitely made a little formula in my head that said lots of birth preparation about physiological birth plus home birth plus no intervention equals breastfeeding beautifully. For me, like talking about it to somebody in the street, I can talk about it with a really straight face, not getting emotional at all. Whereas like the women that I were working alongside at the creative workshops, I was like a blubbering mess. I couldn't stop that. I knew it's because they got it. It was hard for me not to talk. It was hard for me to talk about it so anecdotally and just whatever, because I knew that they were looking at me like, I know, I get it.
Well, it's being seen, isn't it? It's that being seen. And actually, it's quite hard to be seen and to allow ourselves to be seen. But when we are seen, then somehow we've become much more authentically real ourselves. I see you kind of going forward and being a great mentor to lots of women. I just kind of can tell that you've just gone on this epic journey, and it's got a lot of meaning for you, and it won't just end here.
I don't think it will. My hospital's Maternity Voices partnership, they're calling out for people to come, and I've got involved with that recently. So I don't feel like it's something that I can just kind of let happen and then just let pass, and I think it's too big.
Yeah, life-changing.
Yeah. When I look back now at me without a child, before I've entered this world of motherness, I were ignorant to how massive it is. The peer supporters at the Breastfeed Together, they say we would absolutely love a hub, maybe in the city centre, where everyone can come to us rather than us.
Totally, going out and around and about.
Yeah, something that everybody knows about. You're giving the information when you're discharged from hospital, saying this is where all the women are that you can go and get support from, and there's peer supporters there for breastfeeding, and the infant feeding team would come and do clinics there.
Yeah, that's where you'd have your tongue-tie person.
Yeah.
You also have like a journaling and a writing and singing and all that other stuff.
That kind of a hub, an accessible hub that people know about, that's not kind of postcode lottery.
It's just for everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Holding Time podcast. We're grateful to everyone involved in this project, including our partners and funders, Bradford District Care Trust and Arts Council England and Better Place Bradford, and all the incredible mothers and families who made it all possible. For more information, visit holdingtime.org. The link is in the episode description. Please like, follow or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And consider sharing this podcast to help raise awareness and support for breastfeeding.